Number 7, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
This question, Mr Speaker, is to the Minister for Economic Development and asks, does he stand by all of his statements in relation to the Tokerau Northland Regional Growth Study and Action Plan? If so, how?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, yes I do, and I'm particularly excited the members asked the question today because one of the key actions of that plan is the Puhoi to Wellsford Highway north of Auckland, and today is a very special day. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Transport have launched the construction of the Puhoi to Warkworth section, which is 18.5 kilometres of road that's going to help link Northland with Auckland. It is one of the most important projects in the plan, and I want to thank the member for his question and coming to the House to celebrate this great progress.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, right.
Is it not a fact, Minister, that after 8 years of this promise, as we speak, after 8 long years of this road of national significance, not 1 metre has been built?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, I bring good news for the member. Starting today, 18,500 metres of this project are being built, 18.5 kilometres. It's a $709 million project, which is going to help tourism, it's going to help road transport, and it's even going to help the member get home to St Mary's Bay after a day in the constituency.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
What on earth happened when he expresses today the Puhoi to Warkworth Highway to his Puhoi to Wellsford Highway promise in the Northland by-election?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, only the member could be so negative. The day the government starts building a $700 million road to his constituency, could he be the only person to be that negative? But I checked, Mr Speaker, because I wondered if he'd be like that. And you know, that member has put out 50 press releases on Northland this year, and literally 49 of those press releases have been negative about Northland, and literally 1 has been positive, Mr Speaker. So I presume we could only expect him to come down here like the Grinch and decry a $700 million investment in Northland.
Supplementary question, Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that the press release he was just waving about was in fact celebrating Winston Peters' election victory at his own seat?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, it is fair to say that he thinks he's the only good thing that's happened to Northland in 100 years. But, Mr Speaker, no, it was on something else. But perhaps one of these 49 negative ones might be about Winston getting elected.
Supplementary question, Speaker.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If the plans proposed 300 million ngafa wood processing mill near Kaikohe was a key part of his and the government's led action plan to, quote, using his words, transform the region, end of quotes, how come the Minister of Energy's abject failure to rein in the Electricity Authority's proposed power increases has seen that 300 million plan axed just yesterday?
The Honourable
Well, Mr
Stephen
Speaker,
Joyce.
the NAFA proposal was one of 58 actions in the Northland Regional Action Plan, and that's why it's exciting to talk about the road today, Mr Speaker, which is one of the other 58 in the plan, and that's a $700 million investment in Northland. In terms of that particular project, it's not just about the Electricity Authority, and I understand for the member they are going to release some updated proposals next week, so he should wait for those. It's primarily about perhaps not enough wood resource at this stage at that part of the region. But the good news is, with a brand new road, we'll be able to bring timber in from south of Auckland if he wants to the new Ngāwhā processing plant.
Which doesn't exist after yesterday.
Order. Can we just have
fool.
Order.
What a fool.
Order.
Supplementary question.
Order.
Okay.
The member will resume his seat. That is not the way to rise and start a supplementary question. If the member wants one, I might entertain it.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
How will wood be brought all the way up north on his superhighway to a complex that has now been shut down as of yesterday in terms of its planning? And could he tell us what he's going to do, for example, about extra power pricing increases for the Northland Strategic Irrigation Infrastructure Study, another big statement he made when he was bull dusting around Northland?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce, there are two questions there. The Minister can address
Well,
either.
Mr Speaker, the member would know something about power price increases because when he was in government, they increased dramatically and they're actually decreasing around the country over the last couple of years, Mr Speaker. But once again, Mr Glass three-quarters empty. The project is not going ahead at this point, but it may go ahead in the future. They've just put it on the shelf because the bigger problem is lack of wood, as I pointed out. But for the member, there is lots of other good news. There's the Hunter Vasta Arts Centre in Whangarei the government is helping. There's the QRC Tokerau Resort College in Pai here. There's the ultra-fast broadband projects. We've put in half the funding for the improvements at Whangarei Airport, which open in the next couple of weeks.
Bring the answer to a
And of
conclusion.
course, there's the $700 million for the Puhoi to Wellsford Road. I'm waiting for the member's second positive press release of the year.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston
Why
Peters.
would any halfway informed person say about Northland with respect to Ngafa that there could be a shortage of wood when there are football fields of wood being transported off overseas in the most raw form, which is Northland's problem he's doing nothing about?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
I think the member wants us to build a wood wall around Northland to stop the logs leaving, Mr Speaker.
Order. Question number 8.